Why do serial killers exist? It's a question that's as terrifying as it is fascinating, right? Names like Ted Bundy, the BTK killer, Eileen Wuornos, they're practically household names. But the why, the reason they did what they did, that's still a deep, dark mystery. So today, we're going to dive into the minds of some of America's most notorious killers and see what we can find.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The mind of a serial killer is one of those mysteries that just doesn't have a neat, tidy ending. It's this puzzle that pulls us in, a strange mix of fear and, let's be honest, a morbid curiosity about how a person gets to that point.
So this brings us to the big central question of this whole explainer. Is it nature, something they're just born with, hardwired into their DNA? Or is it nurture, the world around them, their upbringing, the things that happen to them? Or is the real answer a whole lot more complicated?
Okay, so to really unpack this, we're going to need the right tools. We're going to use a criminological framework to look at all the pieces, the biological, the psychological, and the sociological factors that all seem to come together to create these uniquely terrifying individuals.
First things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What makes a serial murderer different from other killers? Well, the defining feature is this cooling off period. It's this time when they return to their seemingly normal life between the killings. In this period, it can last for days, weeks, or sometimes even years.
Now this model right here, it illustrates the whole argument perfectly. On one side, you've got nature, we're talking biological stuff like genetics or maybe brain dysfunctions, and on the other side, you've got nurture, things like childhood trauma and other environmental problems. The model shows how these two forces can grind against each other, creating issues like aggression, bad coping skills, and impulsivity, and that can eventually bubble up into personality disorders and ultimately violent tendencies. See, it's not one or the other, it's the devastating combination of both.
All right, so with that model fresh in our minds, let's crack open the case files on 3 very different serial killers and see how this actually plays out in the real world. We're going to start with maybe the most infamous of them all, Ted Bundy. On the surface, this guy was handsome, he was charming, an intelligent law student. But underneath that very convincing mask was an absolutely brutal predator who confessed to at least 30 murders.
When you look at Bundy's profile, you can really see how heavily nurture can play a role. He grew up exposed to his grandfather's violence and, despite his outward confidence, was just eaten up by insecurities. Criminologists might look at this and point to something called strain theory. That's the idea that when people can't get what they want through normal means, they feel a strain that can push them toward crime. For Bundy, you mix that strain with his dark fascinations, and it just fueled his narcissistic and antisocial personality.
Okay, next up is Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. And what's so incredibly chilling about Rader is that for over 30 years, he was a family man, a church leader, a friendly neighbor, all while secretly taunting the police with letters describing his crimes.
Rader absolutely perfected what experts call the mask of sanity. His constant need for attention screams of extreme narcissism. And get this, he even created an alternate persona, Factor X, which he claimed was the one doing the killing. It was his way of compartmentalizing his violent side. His job at a security company also gave him unique access and knowledge, which links right into routine activity theory, the idea that crime happens when a motivated offender finds the right target without anyone around to stop them.
And our final case file is Eileen Wuornos. Now, her case is really unique. Unlike many female serial killers who might kill more quietly, Wuornos killed just like her male counterparts, with a gun, up close, and personal. Her life was just this relentless story of trauma and survival on the absolute fringes of society.
With Wuornos, man, the nurture side of the equation is it's overwhelming. She suffered from what are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which are these incredibly traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and abandonment. Her total lack of connection to family or society points to social bond theory, which basically suggests that people without strong social ties are more likely to break the rules. You take that deep alienation, combine it with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, and you get an incredibly volatile mix.
Okay, so we've looked at their backgrounds and their stories. Now let's bring in a psychological tool to analyze their minds with a little more precision. So, what exactly is a psychopath? It's a word we hear all the time, but according to the pioneering researcher Dr. Robert Hare, it's a very specific collection of personality traits. And here's a really key thing to remember.
While a lot of serial killers have psychopathic traits, not all of them actually meet the clinical definition of a psychopath.
To measure this, researchers use something called the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, or PCLR. Think of it like a 20-point scorecard for psychopathic traits, where each trait gets a score from 0 to 2. And when we apply this test to our 3 cases, wow, the total scores are all over the place. Bundy scores an almost perfect 39 out of 40. Wuornos scores a very high 34. But then look at Rader. He only scores a 23.
So here's the breakdown. The clinical threshold, the magic number for being considered a psychopath, is a score of 30 or higher. This means that, based on the data, both Ted Bundy and Aileen Wuornos are classified as psychopaths. But Dennis Rader, the family man, the church leader, is not. He has a lot of psychopathic traits, for sure, but he doesn't actually cross that clinical line. And honestly, that's a pretty chilling thought all by itself.
So what does all of this, the theories, the case files, the hard data, what does it all tell us? Let's bring all the evidence together for the final verdict.
This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's not simply nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture working together. It suggests that biological predispositions might create a potential for violence. That's loading the gun. But it's the trauma, the abuse, and the strain from their environment that ultimately pulls the trigger.
Which leaves us with one final and pretty unsettling thought. We can analyze the patterns, we can identify the risk factors, but if creating a monster is this complex dance between our genes and our life experiences, can we ever truly explain or predict the nature of evil? That right there is the mystery that remains.